All right. It is with great joy that I welcome Frank Klepacki to the celebration of the 20th anniversary of Yuri's Revenge. Frank is the composer of most of the wonderful music that we all know from the CNC franchise. Thank you so much for being here with us. It's an honor. You know, your music is a huge part of our community. Obviously, we listen to it all the time. It's such an honor to have you here. So thank you for taking time out of your day. Um, And one thing I wanted to bring up, I just discovered this a couple days ago, and a lot of people probably don't know this. You've actually helped keep the community alive, not just through your awesome music, but you did a voice for a mod a few years back. Well, I forget the name of the mod. It was like Allied. Do you
I think it
recall?
was Mental Omega. Is that it?
Maybe you, but I just can't believe I found that. I was like, wow, this guy is helping us keep things alive. So thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. Yeah, I've always been a supporter of the community, and they're actually the ones responsible for keeping the legacy alive all of these years. You know, these games have just taken on a life of their own through the fans that care about them enough to continue to either do mods or to just continue finding ways to keep it playable on different operating systems or whatever. So it's really fun, and yeah, I'm always enjoyed being part of that, and seeing how that continues to happen.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much. And before we dive into the interview proper, the first question I have, a couple days ago, somebody reached out to me and said, "Hey, you got to ask Frank because he wasn't sure. He said you got to ask him if he's got any new music coming out. So, and I think you have a new album coming out. Can you tell the fans where they can listen to your music and if you have any new stuff coming out?"
Yeah, so basically, I had released a new album this year in April called Quarantine Sessions because throughout all of 2020, with all live music and touring being shut down and everybody just kind of working remotely, all of my free time I started to just put towards that and trying to figure out how do I keep my sanity through this, because like
Yeah.
everyone, we all went through different things in our own way, but that was how I dealt with it. And
Hmm.
so that was me revisiting other older tracks of mine that I'd released on my solo albums, but revisiting them and giving them a kind of a fresh coat of paint, if you will.
Awesome.
Doing reimaginings of how they sound by playing them mostly live. Drums,
Sure.
guitar, bass, keys, everything, just like focusing on the performance aspect of it. And it started with a song called Virus, which was on my first CD called Morphscape. And I said, well, how fitting would it be to do a fun video of that song now with a pandemic, and all of us, having to deal
Oh
with an
yeah.
actual virus, right?
That's awesome. Yeah.
So that kind of sparked the idea. And it was
Cool.
just going to be the one song and just do a fun video of me wearing a different face mask in every instrument. And so that video actually came out and everything. But then it got me thinking, well, what else could I revisit in my back catalog? Because that was kind of a fun experience to reimagine that. And so that got me thinking about other favorite tracks. And before I knew it, I had a whole album worth to put out. So yeah,
Awesome.
and that's available everywhere that you can listen to music. So whether you purchase it digitally or physically off my website, frankklepacki.com, or if you have Spotify or Amazon Music or Apple Music, whatever the case may be, it's up there.
Cool.
So yeah, anybody can listen to that and go on YouTube and watch the videos that were made for it subsequently too.
Excellent. Sweet. Yeah, that's a great use of pandemic time is making
Yeah,
lots of music, I guess. Yeah.
yeah.
Cool.
If anything, it gave us a lot of time to reflect more on what we can do within our own space,
Hmm.
and that was a way for me to kind of get through that time, honestly.
Yeah.
I am working on something new in addition to that now,
Oh.
but that's kind of connected to my Patreon community. So
Okay.
I started up one of those at the end of last year, and it was a way for me to involve a tighter knit group of people into my process, which I
Awesome.
don't typically make public. I usually just wait for till something's ready and then I announce it, on all the platforms, and hey, this is coming out. But
Right.
in this case, they're along for the ride, and every week I do an update on what I'm working on, and how I've taken some of their suggestions of genres, or going back to old favorites or whatever, and reinterpreting new music in that sort of collaborative sense. And it's been a
Awesome.
unique experience.
Cool. Well, that's killer. We'll have to be on the lookout for that. And yeah, it's, that is such a cool thing that you're giving to your Patreons because at least for me, being a musician, and writing music, it feels sometimes like if somebody walks in the room, it feels a little bit like, hey, whoa, 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 you're watching something a little too private here. So that's amazing that your patrons are able to do that.
Yeah.
Can people find your Patreon just through your website
Yeah,
or?
I have a link on there, but also it's just patreon.com/ my name, Frank Klepacki.
Okay,
So it's
fantastic.
easy to find that way too.
Awesome. Well, I hope everybody considers joining if you can afford to do so, and to help support his endeavors because that's super awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Sure, sure, my pleasure.
Yeah. Okay. So let's dive into some CNC and music questions here. Just
Mhm.
got a few for you.
Okay.
So Doofus, who is sort of the main organizer for this event, he's a Dutch player, and I imagine that's not his birth name, but that's
Yeah,
what everybody knows him by.
sure.
um, so he wanted to know how you got your start at Westwood. I think a lot of people might not know just how obviously we know you're a musician, but a lot of us don't know how you got your start in the video game industry.
Yeah, well, like many industries, I started at the bottom and kind of worked my way up from that. I started as a tester. I was
Mm.
a QA tester.
Mhm.
I was still in high school, and that was sort of a summer job that I took. And you know, I thought, how great is that? Get paid money to play video games, right?
Yeah.
Well, little did I know though that there's more to it than that. It becomes more like work when you realize what it is you have to do, which is you have to play the game as many ways as possible, not just
Right.
get through it, right?
You got to see the sausage getting made.
Yeah, you have to try to intentionally break it,
Yeah.
like what happens when I take all of my units and just drive them to the top of the right hand of the screen, or what happens if I try to attack the wrong thing with this, or whatever, press
Hmm.
buttons in a certain succession.
Yeah.
Anything that can disrupt or glitch out the game, that's what your job is. So I
Hmm.
was doing that, but I was very distracted by the process of make the game development. I would see the behind the scenes essentially of how this games are made, and that
Huh.
really intrigued me. And I was interested in just walking around and talking to everybody. And I was like, hey, artist department, this is so cool what you're doing. I love this. Da, da, da. What
Hmm.
tools are you using? And
Yeah.
talk to programmers like, how do you make that work? And designers, how do you come up with these ideas? And so and that's what a teenager does. You're just very intrigued and inquisitive about everything. So needless to say, that made for me not being the greatest tester, so I didn't last long in that position. But it did open another door in the sense that I got to meet a lot of great people.
Hmm.
I got to become more interested in the process and become more interested in being a part of it, quite honestly. So at that point, even as someone in high school, I already had professional musician experience,
Hmm.
performing and,
Sure.
and starting to compose my own stuff, even, and working in recording studios. I had kind of a jump start on that because I took interest in it very early in my life. So by the time, I graduated high school, I hit up the audio director at Westwood and said, listen, I'm going to be looking for a job after I get out of school, and here's some stuff that I wrote, and I work with a computer and I program my own stuff, and
Which
and
back then probably wasn't super common to have a musician proficient with music technology.
yeah, and technology was still in its infancy too, so it's not like it was, in my eyes, that difficult to grasp.
Mhm. Yeah.
But it may have just be the way that I was putting myself out there to do it.
Hmm.
Needless to say, I got a chance to prove myself in that realm to see if I could be assistant to to him in that regard and have another position at Westwood. So that basically was how I got into being a composer. After a few months of doing this kind of trial period to see if I would work out,
Yeah.
then I was offered the full-time position, and that's been my role ever since.
That's amazing. Wow, how fun. That's inspiring in so many ways, right? Because if you find a passion and you just kind of do what it takes to dive in and go for it, you never know what could happen.
Yeah, and I think for me it was like right place, right time too, because
Hmm.
as I said, the technology was more of it in its infancy at the time. The first game
Yeah.
I worked on was on the original Nintendo Entertainment System. So, going back that far, I got started basically in 90, and with testing, and then 91 when I took the composing position. But that was limited to 3 monophonic FM synthesis channels and a white noise channel for a little drum beat, and that was it. So that'd be like going to you and saying, "Hey, write me a song with a flute, a clarinet, a bass, and a snare drum. Go."
Sure.
That's
Yeah.
what writing music for the Nintendo was like.
Huh. That is so cool. How cool.
And
Thank you for
then,
sharing that.
with each year that came after that, technology improved, so I got to adapt to, oh, now what can I do? Oh, now I can use 6 channels instead of 3, or now I can use more programmed instruments with FM synthesis. Now I can use this kind of audio card. Now I can use this particular console has these capabilities, and now we can do
Yeah.
sampled drums instead. And it was just a constant gradual stair steps to what we know now as just everything is on the same par quality with movies and TV and everything else. You're
Right.
working with live orchestras or bands, or access to professional audio equipment that we are expected to use.
Yeah, and you were on the ground floor of that as well, talking about the how we expect video games now to have music that is of cinematic quality. You were
Right.
in on the ground floor of that with CNC actually making, incorporating movies and these crazy fun storylines into the game itself. So, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a really great time for being involved in game development. It was just kind of the Wild West, and
Huh.
everybody was excited to experiment and try new things and see what they can make work. And
Yeah.
and fortunately, I was part of that era where among the first games to use streaming audio. Which means that it was sounded the way exactly I recorded it. Instead of
Right.
having to administer specific techniques towards what audio cards were available or what console capabilities were there that we were always limited by. Now that was thrown out the window, and we could just stream exactly what I recorded. So that was pretty cool. Even though it was downsampled to 22K and
Sure.
mono, it was still the principle that there's contemporary sound now that you're hearing in a
Yeah.
game. And how cool is that?
How cool. That is so cool. Thank you for sharing that. And that leads really nicely into the next question. You know, Command and Conquer, especially the Red Alert series, it's like so fun, so quirky, so I mean silly in a lot of ways, but I think that the music is integral to that experience. So, do you remember, and if you can't remember, that's okay. Do you remember if there was anything about the gameplay or the storyline of the Red Alert series specifically that inspired the music? Because it is such a quirky story.
Yeah. So there's a ton of ground to cover on that, but I'll try to just keep my answers confined.
That's all right.
In well, first of all, it should be known that when Red Alert was first starting, I didn't even know what the subject matter was. I just knew
Okay.
I knew we were doing a sequel to CNC, but I didn't
Sure.
know that it was going to be taking place at an alternate history, thing. So I just assumed it was going to be moving forward from CNC, like where Tiberian Sun would have gone,
Right.
not backwards. So because of that, actually, the first song I wrote or one of the first songs I wrote with a new CNC in mind was, in fact, Hell March.
Oh, okay.
So I wrote that thinking, oh, this could be a track for Nod maybe or something, and not thinking about, what this new storyline would be. And then when the
Yeah.
president heard it for the first time, he's like, wow, this should be the main theme for the game. And I'm like, seriously? And so that's kind of how that kind of started. And
Huh.
then now that I had the information about where the game was going, then it, started making me think, well, should I like make a different sounding soundtrack then that's more retro? And he's like, no, keep it contemporary, continue your CNC sound, but maybe just refine it more. And so then, so that kicked off sort of the way of the direction of the music of Red Alert, and me kind of refining what, the best, I think, most powerful elements of CNC was moving forward,
Right.
but make it more industrial, make it more this, make it more that. And but keep still a variety of influences in mind, but at least I kind of came into my own style at that point.
Hmm.
Moving forward into Red Alert 2, again, it was still, kind of following that same bridge into that as a continuation, but even more beefed up. And just it was more over the top and fun and campy, and all of, like you said, all of the storylines and videos. And so it was just us having fun creating content for this wacky game that it takes place in an alternate history, but has all of these crazy elements, and talking about, of course, getting into Yuri's Revenge, that direction for me musically was to take the sound of the Red Alert, but turn it into more of a B movie sci-fi vibe with it,
Yeah.
because that's what Yuri felt like to me as a
Yeah, you can hear
character
that. You can
and
really hear that, I think.
and as a faction. And I found these old timey samples of different movie quotes and old little orchestra bits or just sound effects even that sounded like they were old from old movies, and in fact they were. I come to find out later they were licensed for sample libraries that I was using.
Hmm.
But I incorporated that into the sound of Red Alert for Yuri's Revenge, and um, it was a conscious decision, and I thought it worked well to feel like it's still part of that same universe, but it's his own. You know,
Yeah, absolutely. I,
yeah.
you know, I I had a question about those samples. And you just answered it, but like, the so the drive to incorporate those really uncanny vocal samples, that was just to reiterate what you're saying so I make sure I understand, that was an intentional part of embellishing the campiness, the B moviness. Is that right?
Yes,
Oh,
and
how
it was.
cool. That is
Yeah,
that's what we like,
because
the an act on instinct, we will stop them. I mean, you did that early too, but you can I think it's on a lot of the tracks in Yuri's, right?
it's on a few of them for sure. The like his main theme in there is Drock, right? That's
Hmm.
that's the main melody and hook for Yuri and his faction.
Yeah.
So and there's some samples and things that I put into that to emphasize that. A lot
Hmm.
of stuff about the mind and brain, stuff and mind control, because that was indicative of what he does. So
Yeah.
I thought that was very fitting to incorporate. And Brain Freeze is another one that capitalizes on that too. It's more action based and has similar elements that worked well for that. So yeah, I enjoyed going in that direction. It was just a lot of fun, and that's also something that was special about working at Westwood at that time and working on those games. The fact that we were encouraged as the people who were creating content, we were encouraged to think out of the box and to do more zany things, or at least try it and see how it fit, if at all. And a lot of times we kept stuff in that was a little bit weird, or whatever.
You're a little on
um
the edge about,
you know
should we do this?
I mean, I just have to say that I'm glad that I was allowed to have that kind of creative freedom, and that they let me run with that stuff and were accepting of it, because um I don't think there's enough of that nowadays in
Mm,
modern games, with just the approach to development in terms of what's asked of a composer.
mhm.
A lot of times they're just asking composers to sound like XYZ,
Sure.
or copy this sound or whatever. And
Yeah.
rarely is it a chance to really express yourself or come up with a different idea. And a lot of people are just kind of thinking about what would you literally do in the context of this setting. I think if Yuri's Revenge were composed today or developed today, it would be completely different, because people would
Hmm.
take it too seriously and try to
Yeah.
model it after something else and not
Huh.
make it as crazy or zany. And musically, the fact that this is supposed to be taking place post World War II era, and but we're using contemporary industrial metal music, and hip
Yeah.
hop and electronica and all of this stuff. There's something
Huh.
to be said for having styles that don't necessarily immediately come to mind as matching each other, but if you can put it into the context and try it and see how it works, you might be surprised. So
Yeah. No, I think that is really good insight. And you know that I'm a musician, and it's so great to hear all this, and I think the community will appreciate this, because I don't know why, but I think this conversation might we might be able to glean a reason. There's a lot of musicians who play this game. Like I'm on a Discord server with with a bunch of people who play this game, and I'll just randomly find out, oh, you're a musician too. That's weird. So I don't know. I think there's just something really in the creative process that made this game a reality that makes artists makes their, I don't know, something in their brain really excited.
Yeah.
Cool. So um moving on, I could skip that question about the samples because you already addressed that. That's so cool. So Distant Q, another player, his name's Josh. Actually, he's another player in the community. He pointed out to me recently about he pointed out the amazing sound design in Yuri's Revenge and Red Alert 2. Like, I never really thought about it before. I mean, I think that's part of the quality of it. You don't think about it because it's not bad. It's just there and you accept it. But I was really thinking about how there's different voices for different characters and they're triggered by different things. And I know that for I think Universe at War, you did like scratch vocals for like death screams and certain things like that to demo them. How much collaboration, if any, was there between you and like the Foley artists and the other sound designers for Yuri's Revenge and Red Alert 2?
So the sound department was comprised of multiple people. So there was usually a sound design lead. Of
Sure.
course, my audio director's involved, and that was also like Red Alert 2 and all that was developed by our sister studio, which was in California too. So we were working back and forth together
Hmm.
on different stuff. So I didn't really have a lot of say actually in the sound design process. That was really left to the leads to do. But I strictly was just on the soundtrack at that
Okay.
point. It wasn't until I joined, you know, well, actually, no, I should take that back. I did occasionally collaborate on some sound stuff or voice stuff with the audio department on certain games. Like I got to voice certain characters, like in CNC, and make cameos in some of the movies. Usually I would die somehow, but the only game I didn't die in I think was uh, Dune 2000. I got to be an Ordos assistant for a bit.
Nice.
He wouldn't recognize me though. They put a bald cap on me, make me look really old, and I was like tinkering with the dude's head and stuff.
Oh, how
Anyhow,
fun.
didn't want to get off subject, but anyhow, yeah. Just to answer your question, yeah, I wasn't that involved in the sound design process, but
Okay.
we had guys that were on top of that, and like Dwight Okahara was our lead sound guy at Westwood and did a lot of that, sound work and implementation. Paul Mudra did a lot of sound work and implementation and voice direction and all of that. So it was, yeah, it's always fun to just see constant, movement and, progression happening throughout the studio at that time.
Yeah.
Like just walking around the halls, you would have a conversation with somebody about what they're doing or how a new feature got implemented, and just stuff like that is just cool. It's you're part of a bigger picture, and it's
Yeah.
that much more rewarding to see it all come together at the end of it.
Absolutely. Cool. Very cool. Just a few more questions, if that's okay. If you're short on time, that's all right.
No, I got plenty of time.
Okay. Okay. Um, so one of the other organizers of the event, Matt, he pointed out that we were just talking about the CNC franchise in general, and he pointed out that the sound, the vibe of the music from Tiberian Sun is pretty unique among the catalog. I mean, there's similarities, surely. I mean, one of the dissimilarities is there's almost no. I think there might be no acoustic instruments, and I'm counting electric guitar as an acoustic instrument in Tiberian Sun, if I'm recalling correctly. So can you talk a little bit about the musical decisions that you made to enhance the tone of Tiberian Sun and how that differed from sort of the campiness of Red Alert?
Hmm. So Tiberian Sun was, of course, the actual sequel to Command and Conquer, and
Right.
so with that in mind, um, I immediately kind of jumped the gun and started writing what I felt would be the next gradual, forward music on that particular soundtrack. And when I submitted my first few tracks for consideration, I actually was asked to change direction
Hmm.
because they wanted it to feel a bit different. They wanted it to feel more post-apocalyptic,
Okay.
and more serious and not
Hmm.
as you know, in the same vein of well, I mean, not to say it wasn't in the same vein of CNC, but not in the same uh, sound that was, a direct continuation. They
It
wanted
was
it,
like a progression rather than a variation.
yeah, they wanted me to focus more on ambient stuff and whatnot. And And here's the interesting thing that happened. Um, I was under the gun with 3 projects simultaneously that I was working on at the time.
Hmm.
So, and I'm having to like flip a switch in the back of my brain to go from one mode into another in terms of what I'm going to write, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, okay, cool. I'm going to get a jump start on CNC, and here's a few tracks I've got now that are done, and I'm pretty confident they're going to make it in. And then I get pushed back and going, no, this is not where we want to go. And I'm like, oh, well, that's a waste of time then. Now I just, now I have to start over. At the same time, I'm trying to meet a deadline for the next Lands of Lore game. At the same time, I'm trying to meet a deadline for, I think, what was it, Knox at the time or something
Mm.
like that. And those were very tight windows of months that I had to fit all of that in.
Mm.
So we had to bring on a couple of other composers at that time to help me with those projects.
Right. Right.
Lands of Lore, David Arkenstone was helping on that project. So we split duties on that. And then I brought in my friend Jared Mendelson to help me with Tiberian Sun, because if I had to start over, I wasn't going to make the whole soundtrack in time. And
Sure.
so, and he had a style of demos that he gave me that I thought was in the wheelhouse of what I thought we could do. And he had different gear than me too, which was also cool, so that we could have some different sounds put in as well. Wouldn't necessarily just be based on what I would set as a precedent. And we actually got to set that precedent together,
Yeah.
because when we brought him on board, we actually got in the same room together and wrote the first few tracks together, uh, completely, with bouncing ideas off of each other. So
Okay.
to
Cool.
me, that was like probably the most fun part of kicking that off, because, I hadn't done that necessarily before. I hadn't collaborated directly with another person in the same room,
Yeah.
composing songs for a soundtrack. So he brought his like Korg Triton with him over to my office, and I was kind of running the sessions, but he would record his parts and he would suggest stuff for me to do, and I would have ideas that came to me like, oh yeah, I want to do this here. Why don't we try a riff that goes like this and da da da.
Cool.
So that was exciting, and yeah, it was just I wasn't ready for like I said, the direction change. So I had to make
Yeah.
those calls in order to fulfill the workload that was required of me at that time as a whole within the company. So that kicked it off, and then after that we went our separate ways, and I wrote a handful of tracks on my own, and Jared wrote some on his own, and that comprised the soundtrack of Tiberian Sun.
Oh,
So
cool.
a lot of it was sort of a mixed reaction from the fans after the fact, because they recognized that it wasn't just a continuation of the CNC that they already established that they loved. They're like, oh, this is a
Yeah.
different direction. Some people really loved it. Some
Yeah.
people didn't love it so much. So there wasn't really a lot of in between that. It was like, it's like either, yeah, this is really cool, or I wish it was more rocking, or whatever. So,
Sure. Sure.
and it is what it is. Again, it was based on the design of the game and what the producers were coming at me with, mainly the president, actually, because he
Hmm.
was very involved in the creative process, Brett Sperry. So and he was always very interested in the music, and and was a visionary that way too. He knew what he wanted to hear, and wanted to make sure that that vision was being met. So I had
Yeah.
to kind of adjust what I was doing.
How cool. I had no idea. I knew about I knew that there was different folks who helped you out with those tracks, but I didn't know that that's how it went. So the sound of Tiberian Sun comes from not only a difference in the artistic process, but also a difference in the material conditions. He brought his gear, and yeah, wow. That's so cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
I got 2 more questions for you if you have time. They're quick.
sure, no problem.
And they're a little bit selfish and nerdy, but I gotta ask, what is it like playing drums with the Family Stone? I mean,
Oh,
that is, for some of the people who are watching, especially younger folks who don't know about the Family Stone, they really changed the landscape of music in what, late '60s, '70s, and you play drums with them now. What is that like?
that's a dream come true for me,
You're a
honestly.
drummer first, right?
Yeah. I started my professional career as a performing drummer, since I was 11. When I was about 12 years old, I was very much into rock music, but I started to get a love of funk music too. And Sly and
Hmm.
the Family Stone is a band that is largely responsible for that, because although I was familiar with some of their music at that age, at that time I saw the movie Woodstock, the original 1969 festival movie.
Yeah.
that featured Jimi Hendrix and the Who and Santana and all of these bands that were really coming into their own of that era. And Sly and the Family Stone was part of that bill. And when I saw their performance specifically on that movie, it blew me away. And I said, that is what I want to do someday, right there. That is encompassing everything that I want to accomplish somehow. That kind
Yeah.
of energy, that kind of music, that kind of audience reaction, like that, it spoke to me just out of the TV. And so I played in various rock metal bands and then eventually funk bands, trying to do original music, trying to have that sound with horns and just that lively energy and feel good music. And eventually I befriended the original sax player from the Family Stone, Jerry Martini.
Yeah.
That was in the late 90s when I had a funk band at the time called Home Cookin', and we were releasing our own CDs, and told him basically through an email, happy birthday email to him from a fan site, like I didn't expect to hear anything back from him. I just wanted him to know, hey, you inspired some young people and want to do funk and be involved with horns because of you and what you did with the band, and that music was so great. Anyhow, he wrote me back and thanked me for that and wanted to hear the CD, and I sent it to him, and it was just that kicked off kind of a friendship between us. And he invited me over to see the shows when they came to town, when they started the Family Stone back up again. Sly himself is retired these days, but the Family Stone still tours under that name. And so about 10 years later, 2008, I get a call from him saying, hey, Frank, some of the band members have changed, and, our management changed. And I was wondering if you'd be interested to play drums with us. And at that point, my jaw's on the floor going, hell yeah, but I had to figure out how I was going to manage my work video game schedule with touring.
Sure.
And it turns out that they mainly tour on weekends. So it allowed me to, take a flight out Friday night, play the gig Saturday, come back Sunday, or whatever, or,
Right.
do a few days in a row,
Wow.
take a couple of days off here and there. Fortunately, I'm exceptional at time management, so I can make sure that whatever I need to get done is done before I need to take any days off.
I can vouch for that. He was here for the interview on the dot, the time we agreed on. So that's amazing. That's like a dream come true. I can't believe that. That's incredible.
Well, it gets even better. So 2019 is the 50th anniversary of that very festival of Woodstock. And
okay.
so that year, I am in fact playing with the band, and we get asked to play at the original site of Woodstock to celebrate the anniversary and have our own show there.
No way.
So we're playing there at the Bethel Woods Theater, right there on the grounds of where the Woodstock Museum is, in the original field of where the stage was. And I can't believe that I am there on my birthday weekend, no less.
So you're like time traveling, because like little you is watching you on that stage that inspired your career.
Yeah. So I'm doing the very thing that I said when I was 12. That's exactly what I want to do someday.
That gives me goosebumps. That's amazing.
Yeah. That was, it doesn't get any better than that.
Thank you for sharing that story. That is incredible. Wow. So, okay, one last question for you. This should be a quickie, because I'm sure he has. He seems like a nice guy. Has Ed Sheeran sent you royalty checks for Blow yet?
That was funny. So
I'm not trying to start drama. It's meant as a joke. I hope it's not.
Yeah. No, you know what? No, somebody brought that up to me when that song came out. And yeah, it's a little coincidental that the feel is the same. The riff
It's the same riff. It's just a different key.
It's close. The riff is close. It's a little different. But the fact that the song is even named Blow when it comes from the song Blow It Up, right? Or I'm not saying it comes from it. I'm just saying there's a lot of coincidence there. I got a kick out of that. I thought it was funny. I as a music expert, I can tell the difference of when something's different enough. So you know, I'm not saying it was ripped off by any means, but I did ask the question publicly. Did Ed Sheeran play Red Alert 2 back in the day? Yeah.
he's around the age, like he's I think he's about my age. So he would have been, 10, 11, 12 when Red Alert came out. So
it would be a funny coincidence if that was the case. But it's that is funny that you bring that up. So yeah.
I just think it's a cool song. His song it's a good song, but it's funny that his song and Blow It Up, they're very similar. But yeah, I don't think it's worth you know, the lawsuits, you see so many of those now with, oh, you took my chord progression. And I think it's mostly the CD companies or the record labels, not the artists. But
Yeah, it depends,
yeah.
but there are some blatant exact melodies that sometimes are taken from one song to another, and sometimes the artist doesn't even realize they're doing it, but it just happens that way. Like there's the famous Sam Smith Tom Petty connection,
Yes.
with the Stay With Me, which is the
Yep.
exact melody of I Won't Back Down.
Hmm.
So that was obviously something that was a thing that needed to be settled, and was. So
Yeah.
Tom Petty is now a songwriter on that. But but
Oh, it's
yeah,
funny.
it's funny the different things that pop up in the music industry. It's crazy out there now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fun. Again, I'm glad that these games have had the longevity they've had, and all due to the fans. So thanks to the fans for keeping the legacies alive and still appreciating it to this day and celebrating it like you guys are now. So
Yeah, and thank you so much again for stopping in and saying hi. I mean, it just means the world to the community that you would celebrate the 20th anniversary of Yuri's Revenge with us. So thanks again for hanging out. I really appreciate it. And please, everybody, consider supporting his endeavors on Patreon. Search his name, Frank Klepacki. Go to frankklepacki.com, right? That's your website, just your name.com.
yep,
Twitch TV/Frank Klepacki, right?
yep.
Awesome. So be sure to follow him. He's out there. He's making new music. He's reinterpreting old music for the fans. So thanks again for hanging out, and we'll see you soon.
All right, take care. Thank you.
Bye.